Hello, hello. I'm so happy to be doing this interview. I was really excited about this opportunity. Partnership for Digital Access in Africa is such an effective proof point for what we're trying to do with this event. You are truly connecting the unconnected. And you're doing it in this very coalition-minded, very galvanizing way. And I'm very, very pleased to bring to the stage, first and foremost, Jordan, who leads America's Frontier Fund, which is a key partner of PDAA and instrumental in expanding partnerships, and Fred Swaniker, who's the vice chair of the board of PDAA and a founder of the African Leadership Group. So thank you very much. We're obviously here to talk about connectivity, broadband, expanding internet access, but I would love to kind of start with this one first world question. I don't know about you, but I lose my mind if I go 1 hour without Wi-Fi. But I'm curious what one lifetime looks like. And so, if I could take it to you, Fred, first and foremost, what does that look like? What does one lifetime without Wi-Fi look like? And can you quantify it?
Well, one lifetime without Wi-Fi means a lifetime without access to knowledge, a lifetime without access to health, a lifetime without access to entertainment and inspiration, a lifetime that is actually cut short because your life expectancy is reduced. And it's a lifetime without income because you're not able to work, especially when we live in a global labor market. So it ultimately reduces opportunity for everyone, and it means entire human capacity that is lost if you're not connected to the internet.
Jordan, you're able to look at this from an American perspective. What's your view on it?
Mm-hmm. I think our most valuable thing in life is time. Time with our families, time with the things we're most passionate about. And I think the thing that internet connectivity does is it gives us more time. I mean, think about how difficult it would be if you had to walk miles to get to a library and then spend time browsing through the library, looking for the right book, and then going through that book, looking for the one fact that you were looking for. That's hours and hours and hours that the internet could have given you in seconds. And so time is what internet connectivity gives us. And that measured over the span of a life is invaluable. I think that's the bottom-up way to see it. I think the top-down way to see it, the McKinsey Global Institute predicted that if there was full digital inclusion on the African continent, that would result in $300 billion more of GDP across the continent. You abstract that now over a lifetime, 75 years, that's $20 trillion of value that is lost as a result of not having internet connectivity. And that value, again, is measured in time that could have been applied to such richer, fuller, better things for every individual on the planet.
You mentioned $300 billion a year. How does that represent percentage-wise as a GDP impact?
Say that again?
GDP impact, $300 billion per year, just so we get a sense of the scale of the impact.
I mean, $300 billion, you could think about that in so many different ways. That's $300 billion in growth that gets applied to the individual's income. So, every 10% of new connectivity results in a 1.3% GDP growth for the continent. Again, abstract that over 75 years. That is just the difference between living in the 1920s and living in the 2020s. It's that big of a difference.
PDAA is a relatively new organization, really created on the back of the Digital Transformation with Africa initiative that President Biden launched a couple of years ago. Curious to know, for the audience, what exactly is PDAA and how did it come about? Fred?
The PDAA stands for the Partnership for Digital Access in Africa. And it's a large coalition that's come together to really make this vision of connectivity real. So it's got 3 pillars. The first pillar is connectivity, where the goal is to connect 1 billion people to broadband by 2030. Today, only about 500 million people are connected. So this is about another 500 million people that would get access to high-speed connectivity at low cost. And so this is about bringing together fiber and mobile and satellite things, using things like SpaceX and so forth. So, the World Bank Group is part of this coalition, and they've committed $15 billion towards financing this aspect. And SpaceX is part of this, and several others, obviously many of the telcos in Africa. So that's the first pillar, connectivity. The second pillar is about devices. It's no use having connectivity if you don't actually have devices. So again, looking at how do we reduce the cost of devices. For example, 30% of the cost of a mobile phone is just because of IP. It's the licensing you're paying to Qualcomm and Broadcom for their technology in there, How do you think about bulk buying? If you're going as a collective and you're buying 100 million phones, suddenly, Samsung and Huawei and ZTE and Apple or whatever, will reduce the costs of those phones, right? It's about reducing the cost of access and also increasing the equity, so ensuring that young women have access to devices, right? So we want to make sure that that's a key part of it. And then the third aspect of it is digital skilling. How do we skill millions of people with software engineering, data science, but also basic digital skilling? How do you use the internet and everything so that they can participate in the global economy? And that aspect, MasterCard Foundation is committing several $1 billion to educate about 330 million people on the continent. So those are the three key pillars. What I like about PDAA is extremely measurable. We are setting up mechanisms to track all of this impact, to be able to see exactly, is this capital flowing? Are the lines being laid? Are the devices being financed? Are banks coming together and providing low-cost financing and so forth, so that this actually comes to fruition.
Digital connectivity, devices, digital skilling, the blueprint for success is very clear. How do you take it from there? How do you double internet access from 500 million to 1 billion, Jordan?
Mm-hmm. And I want to foot stomp on that number of 1 billion people. 1 billion people, that's such an incredible goal, and that's going to take getting 500 million new people connected to the internet. PDAA, as Fred just described, sees it in these three buckets, but the first two are really how you get people connected to the internet. First and most importantly, there has to be access, affordable access to connectivity. Some of the ways we're thinking about providing this are first, leveraging new technologies like Starlink from SpaceX. Starlink's already on the ground doing pilots for how to provide community portals across Africa. Leveraging that new technology can enable low-cost, easy access in areas it wasn't previously possible. The second is using innovative financing mechanisms. So another thing Fred mentioned is bulk purchases. If you can bulk purchase internet from telcos or from SpaceX, you could then provide it at lower cost to populations. And so we're working with partners at the World Bank and others in order to figure out how we can do a bulk purchase across the continent, leveraging the buying power of African governments to then drive that cost down. So providing that internet access is step one, and then step two, as Fred mentioned, is the device. So the studies have shown that affordability is really at $20 per device. And right now, the cheapest devices on the continent are roughly $80. So we have to bring that down. And I think there are two ways we can do this. One, we could work with the suppliers like HMD, Nokia, and others in order to just create cheaper devices. So work on the raw inputs, figure out new mechanisms of production, and get those devices cheaper. But the second is financing. How can you figure out new financing models in order to make the payments easier to bear for individuals and drop that cost over time? So we're also working with groups like IMCOPA in order to create better financing models so that individuals can buy those devices.
Just as a last question, Fred, we started with the bird's eye view. What does digital access in Africa look like from an American perspective? I'm curious to know what it looks like on the ground. What does this initiative mean for the citizens of Africa in very, very concrete terms? What is the impact? What is the yield?
Well, it means several things. For example, it means the ability to digitize government. If you digitize government to digitize government services, this radically improves transparency. because it's much easier to track payments that are going through the system. It improves access, improves performance, and so forth. So this improves governance. It means the ability to deliver healthcare at radically low cost, education at radically low cost. For example, there are digital methods of delivering education. I'm involved in this. I'm training about 200,000 software engineers and data scientists in Africa right now. We're the largest trainer of software engineers in the world. We're doing this at radically low cost. Something that costs $85,000 a year in the US, you can deliver that for $200 in Africa, right? Once you leverage technology. And so, it means jobs. It's an opportunity for Africa to become like the next India. We have the largest youth population in the world. But today, that's a population, it's not talent. Once you educate it, it becomes talent. And you can then build a massive digital economy. Like India generates $240 billion a year from its tech talent, sitting in India, but foreign currency coming into the continent, right? And we can do the same, right? And it's about building a creative economy in Africa. Like what we see Nigerians have done with music. How do we do that with film and art and fashion, all these other things? There's so much that we can do once we have access to technology. But ultimately, this is what I'll end with, is it's a chance for us to redefine what development means. Today, The Economist had an article about how the world's poor are being left behind. And they were measuring it by GDP per capita, saying that GDP per capita has increased in the rest of the world relative to Africa's. And I think that's the wrong goal. Because the West is at $50,000 per person. It's going to keep growing. Africa's sitting at $1,000 to $2,000 per person. Trying to chase that goal means you'll almost never catch up. But what technology does, it allows us to reduce the cost of getting the same standard of living, but within the GDP per capita that you have today. So why should we try and, you can make $200,000 a year in New York and still not afford healthcare. We shouldn't be trying to copy that. You can make $300,000 a year and not be able to get good education. How do you reduce the cost so that someone who can get the same maternal visit, instead of costing $300 in New York, costs you $2 in Africa, because you've leveraged technology. And then who are you to tell me that I'm poor when I have access to the same standard of living as you at a much higher GDP per capita?
Absolutely. Terrific. A great note to end on, and thank you very, very much both for your excellent comments. Thank you.
Thank you.